Everyone, how you doing today? My name's Kirsty and how else do I get this ready before I start? My name's Kirsty and this is part one of my best books of the year, which are the actual novels and books that I read. I say part one because I will be doing a separate graphic novel and manga video of the best of the year, because otherwise this video will be like 40 minutes long or something ridiculous. So yeah, I'm just going to focus on novels for this one. So if you are interested in like my if you are interested in my manga and graphic novels content as well, then please do look out for that. But obviously if you're just here for novels and books, this is the one for you. Hello, Ginty's feet. These are in no particular order. I've seen other people do like rankings, but I will be doing a separate video with my book bracket where I'll be filling that in. So I don't really want to go from best, like the 10 to 1, because I don't know. I haven't yet decided what book of the year is, but it will probably be one of these books. So yeah, let's just go through them. First off is the reread that I was most anticipating, and it did not disappoint. It was as good as the first time. Maybe it didn't make me cry as much the second time, but it was still good. It was still emotional. It still drove home every point it wanted to drive home, and that was Semet Boys by Aidan Thomas. You can tell how good it is because look at how many tabs are in this thing. I was going crazy with the tab in. I used 1.5 of my highlighters. I completely used one up, and then the other one is now starting to run out because I just highlighted pages and pages and pages of this thing. But it's so good. It's, in my opinion, it is the best YA that there is. I don't think I've ever read anything better in the YA genre. And it's queer, it's got that magical element and fantasy element, it's got ghosts, it's got spirits, it's got Latinx culture, it's got discourse on the representation of trans communities within those Latinx communities. It's just such a gorgeous book. I loved it. Julian is one of my all-time favourite characters. It also helps that he is very much ADHD as well. Not confirmed in the book, but the author has confirmed when I asked them. And I just loved this book. And this time around, Maritza was so much better. The first time around, I really didn't like her character, but this time around, I absolutely loved her. If you haven't read it, go read it. Next up, to probably absolutely nobody's surprise, we have a Nalini Singh. Is it any shock that Nalini Singh has made it into my favourite books of the year? No. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Kirsty, and the Side Changeling series by Nalini Singh is pretty much my personality at this point, and I plug it pretty much everywhere I can, and I have a read-along that I am doing with a bunch of you. So if you would like to join, I will link it below. We are currently on book 3, and we've decided to extend that into January. So Caressed by Ice, book 3, is January's pick. So if you are wanting to join and haven't yet had a chance, you still have a month to catch up, and it's only 2 books to catch up with, so you know. But this is like book 15, so you've got a while before we get to this one, and I'm not going to say loads because spoilers, but Resonance Surge, Theo, I think, is now one of my favourite characters in this entire universe. We went back to the Stonewater Bears, who are my favourite changeling pack. I love them so much. I wish I was a bear. I feel like I meet the criteria of being a bear. But yeah, I just absolutely love this. Again, it's one you can tell that I loved it because of all the tabs. And I really love that the further into this series we get, the more sort of explorative her writing is becoming. She's now growing more confidence in writing LGBT characters, so we're starting to get those sprinkling in. And there was one character in particular in this, or one pairing in this in particular, that we've been waiting a long time to get an update on. We finally got the update, and it was just pure serotonin. I loved it. But yeah, if you haven't read the Side Changing series, why not? Just do it. Then we have one that I think is probably the biggest surprise for this year. I didn't expect that I was going to get on with this one. I was sent an arc and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get on with this. It's a generational story, it's magical realism or surrealism. I don't really know the difference between the two. And it's not really the sort of thing that I would pick up, but I really liked the sound of it. It sounded good on the blurb, so I applied to get an arc and I was granted it. And that was Wayward by Amelia Hart. Now, this was, I think, the second or third book I read this year, and I still think about this, and I still think about the quotes that I picked out from it. I feel like it's one of those books that if you read this kind of story a lot, like women's lit and the treatment of women through time and generational stories of trauma, I feel like it's probably nothing new or might be something that you don't enjoy, and I've seen that that's pretty much the biggest critique that people have said about it. But for someone like me who doesn't read it, it was such a fascinating book. The writing was really accessible, really easy to follow. I loved all of the characters. I loved their stories, the way that their histories interwove. And I loved this. And you've got 2019, 1942 and 1619, and they're all women from this one family that's gone through the generations. One critique I've seen is, why is it that because it's a story about women's trauma, it has to involve sexual assault? And I'm like, well, unfortunately, it is an unfortunate fact that for sort of 90% of women, their trauma goes around that, and there is so much of it through history that it's almost impossible to write books about generational trauma and women's trauma and not have that in there somewhere. And to me, that's just a fact of life. That's not trying to make it seem like, oh yeah, we're choosing to include this because we just want to include it. It's like, it is a horrific and horrible fact of history. And I like that Amelia Hart wasn't afraid to talk about it and write about it, but also wasn't afraid to show the women then standing up to those people that did it to them, even though they had different consequences. And I found this a very powerful and beautiful read. And like I said, even though I don't normally read magical realism, I don't normally read generational stories, I was drawn to it, and I'm very glad that I did read it, and it has stuck with me. I just really wish the cover didn't have a bloody moth on it. So yeah, this one was beautiful. I loved the writing, and I do think it's one worth giving a go. And it won a couple of awards on the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I was really, really happy with that because I thought it was brilliant, especially for a debut. Next up, we have Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. This is book 2 in the Legendborn series, so again, I'm not going to talk much about what's in the book itself because obviously I don't want to spoil things. But again, you can tell I had a great time with it by the sheer amount of tabs in this thing. And yeah, I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy where this was going, but I ended up really, really loving it. I really love Bree and Selwyn's relationship and how that grows. I love how Bree's friend Alice, not Chloe. Where did I get Chloe from? Alice. But I just loved that it had her best friend in, and there was just so much in here, and there was loads more history and loads more lore, and it felt this time around that there was less info dumping because we've already had a lot of the information we needed, so it just felt way more action-based and more character-based this time than story and plot-based, and I had a much better time with it. And I am excited for the third one, and I still maintain that Tracy Deonn, for considering this is her first series, I don't even know how she's going to be able to match this, let alone anyone else. So it's going to be amazing. And yeah, this was definitely one of the best ones of the year. Obviously. Take a shot for every time I say that because you're going to be drunk. Next up, we have definitely my favourite audiobook of the year because obviously Joe Jameson. He's always going to immediately make every book better, and that is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I had a great time with this. It was so fun. I felt the relationships were actually realistically portrayed, even though there were immature moments between them and there were moments of like miscommunication or refusing to communicate point blank. On the case of Luke, that boy needed a slap. But I really liked it. I liked that Ollie wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. I liked that he was coaxing Luke out of his shell and trying to get Luke to just be like, see that it's okay to be vulnerable, but on the flip side, I like how Luke gave Ollie the confidence to actually stand up to his parents and be like, no, the way you treat me is not acceptable. And just, I found it really beautiful. Luke's mum, one of my favourite characters. She's just so wacky and zany, and just one of my absolute favourite quotes from this is just talking about, like, she's made a curry, and this curry gives you explosive bowel movements, and Luke was like, I want to save my arsehole, thank you very much. And his mum just drops the best one-liner about being gay and arseholes, and he's just like, oh my god, Mum! And I was just, on the way it was done on the audio, but also when reading it, I had to stop because I was laughing so hard I couldn't listen to what was coming up next. And yeah, the humour on this was just absolutely bang on. The relationships were believable. The friend group were supportive without being toxic. There wasn't that kind of like that one friend that's always trying to make it about them. Everyone was just so loving and supportive of each other, and it was a really good balance. Even the ones that were slightly more self-involved were still able to put their shit aside to help Luke at his time of need. And it was just so good. And I feel like one of the most realistic portrayals of friendship and love that I've seen in quite a long time. Another one that completely blew me by surprise and has entered into possibly going to end up being one of my all-time favourite series ever. And I do have a few people to thank, but mostly the one that is somewhere over there behind me at some point. Well, to my right.
And I'm already raising my hands because that's
They're going like this. And all I can see is this. If any of you have been watching my videos this year, you know that I have been very pleasantly surprised by this series, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I started this last year and DNF'd it, and then Ren came along and we did a thing where we were wanting each other to read, like we picked out a few books each where we were like, you have to read it. And Ren was like, Raven Boys. And I was like, but I've put it on my Unhooked pile. It's on sale right now on my Vinted. And so I thought, well, I'll download the audiobook, because maybe it was just the reading of it I wasn't getting on with it. Maybe I needed the audio. So I downloaded the audiobook, narrated by Will Patton, who is an actor I think is fantastic. And as soon as it was the audio, I fell in love with it. I took it back off Vinted, I rescued it, and I am now almost finished with the second book, and I definitely will continue it. But I can tell, like, I'm obsessed with Ronan. I'm obsessed with Adam. I'm obsessed with Noah. The only two I'm still not obsessed with and completely on board with are the ones that are the main characters, which I find freaking hilarious, because Blue and Gansey, I'm like, they can just go do whatever they want. As long as I've got the other three, I'm happy. And there's just been so wholesome, especially in the second book. There's a scene in particular, like, it's such a small moment in the book, but it just shows how much of a brotherhood they are and how comfortable they are with each other. And it's so cute. It's a moment between Adam and Ronan. If you've read the series, if I say the window scene, you will probably know what I'm talking about. And if you've not read it, then you've just had a non-spoiler thing that I love. Because if I explain it too far, there's a spoiler in there. But yeah, I love the bond between the Raven Boys, and the fact that certainly in the second book, where they're now starting to accept Blue into them and become, she's now seeing them as like part of her family. It just, why did I not get on this sooner? I'm still kind of confused about what grey water is and what everything is, because she's not done a very good job of actually explaining what these things are, but I'm slowly getting there, and it's becoming more enjoyable finding out. Woo! Someone's very, very proud of themselves for that one.
My biggest accomplishment ever.
And another one that was heavily influenced by Ren, and was actually the first book they ever bought me, which is saying a lot considering this year we are definitely in double digits. But I read this in January. I did a vlog. I cried. I had all the feels. I was emotional, and this book has really stuck with me the whole year. and is definitely a contender for Book of the Year for me, and that is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. It's quite hilarious that this is a contender for Book of the Year when In the Lives of Puppets is contender, or is my worst book of the year. I'm like, how can one author just be so... Yeah, I either love his work or I really hate it. There is no in between with him. But yeah, this one, the stories it tells about grief and moving on, not only for the person who has died, but for the families, it really hit me in a very raw place. I have had a lot of loss from a very young age. Most people's first experience with death is like an elderly relative, like a grandparent or a great-grandparent or a great-aunt or a great-uncle, someone who's already old, and it is their natural time. My first experience of death was my 18-year-old best friend. My second experience of a big death was my mother when I was 21. Then it was my aunt, and then it was finally my first grandparent. To say that that's had a bit of a traumatizing impact on me is probably understating it. But it's meant that I've got a very complicated relationship around death. I also have a almost paralyzing fear of my own death because of it, and this book, it kind of helped me to consolidate some of that fear. I'm still terrified of death and dying, don't get me wrong, but it made me a little bit less panicky about it. And it also, the way that people moved on and some of the scenes, especially the epilogue bit, I was just in absolute sobbing tears, and I was just like, I really hope that my mum and my gran and all of those people that I lost, especially the ones that died so young and unexpectedly, I really hope that they've now found their peace and that they found their tea. And I'm just like, I really hope that they found their doors and that they've moved on and that they're in better places. And this one just, yeah, it was so beautiful. It really did get me. There was one bit where I was a little bit like, this feels like we're starting to stray away from the main message. And it started to almost go into, right, okay, where are we now going with this? Which I'm noticing is a bit of a theme with Clune's writing. And this one, just, it was so beautiful, and I recommend everyone read it, especially if you're like me and you have a lot of uncertainties or fears around death and dying and grief. This one just felt like almost therapeutic in a way. Who needs a therapist? Read TJ Klune, drink some tea.
Yay!
Then we have another one that is a Joe Jameson narration, but this time a different author, different series, but it's continuing the Greatcoat series by Sebastian de Castell, and I finished Saint's Blood. I also now finally have physical copies of all of the books, courtesy of Ren for Christmas.
Welcome.
Thank you. And so I now have all 4 books in physical format as well as the audio. But this is book 3 of the Greatcoat series. Obviously, again, spoilers with talking about it. But things have really, really ramped up in this. There are higher stakes than there were before. Falkio's sort of love interest is in mortal peril, and he's got this conflict of wanting to protect her and like burn the world down to save her, but also because of how she is and her nature and her way of being, she's very much pacifist and anti-violence. So he's got this warring conflict not only within himself but also with her, so there's creating a lot of tension there. There were some huge things that happened in this, and right towards sort of like the last third of the book, everything just went complete chaos, and I was sat there, I was packing orders and doing candle stuff while I was listening to it, and I was just like for the final sort of third of the book, and I ended up having to stop what I was doing because I was like, this is getting so good and my adrenaline is pumping so much right now with all of these revelations and all of this stuff that's going on that I'm at risk of like screwing something up and doing something wrong. But it was just so good, and it's now, as always seems to happen with me, I'm now scared of the final book. I now have about 6 series where I just don't want to read the final book because I'm scared of the emotions that it's going to put me through, and this one is no different. And then the final one for this list is another one that has made it onto a lot of people's all-time, like, yearly favourites list, including Ren. And I think I was actually inspired by Ren to pick this one up. I'm not sure. I'm sure I must have been. That, or I saw it on 2 or 3 different people's, and eventually I was like, okay, someone somewhere tells me I need this book, and that is Delila Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. I am 90% certain it was Ren that convinced me to get this.
I mean, I'll take credit anyways.
It's a sapphic romance, which I've not read a lot of, so I'm still dipping my toe into sapphic romances, and this is my favourite one so far that I've read. I love the dynamics between Delila and Claire. Like, they are so fundamentally different. Claire's very much like, you can even see from the photo, it's pretty much that is what they are. Claire's very much sort of vintage and more like homely, has a daughter, was she married? She was either married or had a partner. Everything has to be in the right place. She likes her outfits to look put together. She likes her life to be put together. While Delila is completely the opposite. She is chaos incarnate. She doesn't really care where she ends up as long as she's got somewhere to sleep. She doesn't care where it is. The only sort of real consistent thing she's got in her life is her photography. But at the start of this, even that is on shaky grounds. And she's very much like the free artist. She doesn't believe in relationships, but we later find out that that's more because of her past, and especially the relationship with her stepmother and her sister. Is it stepsister? Yeah. And we find out that there's just certain things that have happened that have caused her to become the way she is, and just the way these two come together, where Claire kind of gives Delila that safe space, and then Delila helps Claire realise that you don't always have to be perfect and things don't always have to go to plan. And just the way that their dynamics brought things out of each other was so beautiful. I did feel like that switch between having a bit of an attraction to them being in love was a little bit fast for my liking. It did feel a tiny bit insta-lovey, which was a bit frustrating, but it was still brilliantly done. I still loved it. And again, it was similar to Boyfriend Material. I felt like these were real characters. They didn't feel like characters, actually. They felt like real people. It was so good. I loved every minute of this, and I can't wait to continue the series. So yeah. Oh, wait, no. Those are the physical books. I also have a few ebooks. The first one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This one hit me on a really personal level because there was a lot of connection between me and the main character regarding sort of family abandonment and like complicated relationships with fathers in particular. But also it was things like I shared the birthday of the main character. We shared birthdays, which I thought was really freaky and cool. Again, I thought it was quite a realistic relationship with them that built between the two characters. There were a few moments where I was like, okay, both of you just need to be shaken, not stirred. Yeah, I know, that was bad.
No, that was really good. I like that.
But I just, it was a really lovely read for me, and it just hit me on quite a few personal levels, and I really felt I connected really well with the main female character in it. I also have the Shadow of the Fox series by Julie Kagawa. I stand by this being one of the better YA trilogies that I have read, especially ones that are influenced by Asian culture. I felt the lore was beautiful and it was really well explained, and all of the voice actors were great. The descriptions of things were gorgeous, and just it was just so well written. The final book had me kind of having a breakdown throughout the majority of it, because if I wasn't stressing about who was gonna get hurt or die or whatever, I was sobbing over who got hurt or died or whatever. And yeah, it just, Julie Kagawa is not afraid to just annihilate you in the emotions, but she also has such a way of bringing hope, and I can't even get the words to describe it, but she also has a way of bringing beauty and hope. But this one just all round was fantastic. All the characters were likeable. There was all sorts of different kinds of rep in there. I really loved how we had different perspectives, including the demon from the sword. It was so good. And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It was so good. And then finally, one that I read just a couple of weeks ago and has instantly gone into one of my all-time favourites, and I cannot wait to continue the series, is The Reanimator's Heart by Kara Jorgensen. If you are a fan of things to do with death and death magic and necromancy and resurrection and things like that, you will love this book. It is set in a sort of Victoriana England. No, it's not. This is set in like a Victoriana America and features Oliver and Felipe, who both work for a paranormal detective agency. Felipe is one of the detectives. He's sort of like in charge. He's pretty awesome, and he gets himself into a little spot of bother, shall we say, as in the deaded sort. And then we also have Oliver, who is autistic, and honestly, this is the best depiction of autism I've ever read. I felt like I was reading myself on the page, and I just connected so well with Oliver and how he feels about certain things. It even talked about where he avoids certain foods because the textures are wrong, and I'm like, me too. But it didn't just say like you get in a lot of books where there's autism rep, and I'm doing this because sometimes it is literally, you can tell they've gone on Google, gone, what are the signs of autism, and that's what they've written in their book, which to me is not good autistic rep. This is someone who either has autism, I'm pretty sure Kara does have autism herself, but this is either an author who has it or knows someone who has it or has done a hell of a lot of research, because there were subtle nuances and things in there that people don't always realise is an autistic behaviour. And I really, really loved the way it was brought in, but without being too overdone and too, like, you must know this guy is autistic. And I just loved it. I loved how well Felipe just adjusted and accepted Oliver for who he was and didn't at any point try to change him. But on the flip side, there was also Oliver who was trying for Felipe. Like, there were a few things where he knew that that's what Felipe would prefer, so he was trying to make it himself adjust, which I thought was so sweet and supportive. And I just absolutely loved their dynamic. I loved the two of them together, but then also that sort of magical paranormal element there and the necromancy. And Oliver, who works in the mortuary, because his ability, he can bring bones back, like the spirits of people back into their body to find out like how they died and things. And when Felipe he brings him back, and they then have this like super cute bond, and it was just so well done. And I was reading it as a judge for the BBMYA Awards, and it came in, I think it was either second or third place overall, and I was screaming because it is so well deserved, and it was such a good read. I was so happy. And yeah, I definitely want to continue it because I just want more of those two because they're just so cute together. That is now finally my best of the year. There were so many, and like I said, I'm very glad that I decided to take out the manga section because we would be here for another hour. But let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these and if any of these books were part of your top books of the year. Or alternatively, let me know what your favourite book of the year was if you've already chosen, or a few of your favourite books. I really tune in next time for my best manga of the year, or even today. I might upload both these in one day. I don't yet know because I am so late and behind on videos. I'm just playing catch up now. But there will be another video with the best manga of the year coming very, very, very soon. And yeah, I really hope you tune into that one. I hope you're all good. I hope you're staying safe. And until next time, bye.